The 24-70mm f2.8 FE is Samyang's first ever autofocus zoom lens, which is pretty cool, but is it good enough to compete with the likes of the Sony 24-70mm f2.8 G Master? Well, today we're going to find out.
T-minus 15 seconds, guidance is internal.
Although it may not look it, the Samyang is deceptively heavy. It's actually the heaviest 24-70mm lens currently available on the market for Sony E-mount cameras. In terms of specs, both lenses are pretty much evenly matched, with both lenses offering a robust metal and weather-sealed construction. The Sony features a traditional MF to AF switch, a customizable AF lock button, and a zoom lock switch to prevent the zoom sliding out whilst you have it hanging by your side. On the other hand, the only switch present on the Samyang is this custom switch. Now, by default, custom mode 1 doesn't really do anything, it just allows the lens to function just as you would expect. But setting it to custom mode 2 will allow the focus dial to adjust the aperture value instead. Now, although the Samyang doesn't include a zoom lock switch, it doesn't really need it because instead the zoom ring has quite a heavy action to it, which prevents the front element from racking out whilst not in use. In terms of price, the Samyang is quite literally half the price of the Sony G Master, which is pretty impressive, and it means that if this thing can deliver where it counts, we're potentially onto a real winner here. But needless to say, this means that the Samyang scores an early point for price. As for build, needless to say, both of these lenses have been made to a very high standard, so both deserve a point there, clearly. And when it comes to handling, although the Samyang is a little bit heavier than the Sony, I really didn't find it that much of a big deal. Plus, the lens just operates so nicely that I feel like it would be pretty unfair to mark it down just for weight alone. So with that in mind, I am going to give both of these lenses yet another point. When it comes to autofocus, in good lighting conditions, both lenses are rapid to focus and they didn't show any signs of hunting. In low light conditions, both of these lenses took a little while longer to stick the focus, but honestly, both options are still totally usable and they showed absolutely no signs of hunting. When shooting wide open at f2.8 in continuous burst mode, the majority of the photos that we captured with these lenses were pin sharp and in focus, with only one or two that were very marginally out of focus. So with both lenses putting in a pretty impressive performance so far, it's points all round. When shooting a moving target in video mode, both lenses managed to keep locked onto George as he walked towards the camera at a regular pace. When repeating the test at a faster pace, again, neither lens really had any problems at all keeping locked onto George. As for AF noise, both of these lenses are completely silent. In manual focus mode, the Samyang has a slight delay to it and quite a long throw, though in truth, it really wasn't a deal breaker and I was still able to use it for focus pulls. The G Master in comparison is a lot more responsive and has a far shorter throw, making it far more enjoyable to use. Now, whilst we're on the topic of manual focus, I should also mention that the Samyang is parfocal, which means that as you zoom in and out in manual focus mode, the focus will remain in the same spot, which is really handy for videographers. In reality, it's really a fake kind of parfocal thing going on, where the firmware of the lens is just adjusting the focus for you as you zoom in and out. And as you can see here from this footage, there is a very subtle delay to it. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong, it is a nice feature and it kind of does work as intended, but marketing this lens as a parfocal lens is a bit of a stretch and probably a bit misleading. It's a bit like if I marketed myself as a completely competent and professional photographer. Now, that would be taking the piss. Anyway, moving on to our focus breathing test, and the good news is that focus breathing really isn't a problem for either of these zooms, so more good news for videographers. So with more impressive results from both of these lenses, it's points all round once again. In our Bokeh balls test, both of these lenses create nice round orbs across the vast majority of the frame, only turning slightly misshapen at the very far corners. The only small negative point to make is that both of these lenses display quite a nasty onion ring effect, though the Sony is by far the worst offender. As for general bokeh quality, both lenses create a lovely, soft, defocused background when shooting at f2.8, though I would have to say that the Sony results are marginally softer than the Samyang. So both lenses clearly have their own minor faults, so I am going to have to be slightly picky here and award the point to the Sony, as it does offer the cleanest looking bokeh. Though seeing as the results were just so close, I will give the Samyang half a point for its valiant effort. In our lens flare test, although flaring is handled much better by the Sony G Master, the Samyang does create far less noticeable artifacts. lenses. Though in either case, both lenses do come included with lens hoods in the box to help shade the front element in harsh lighting conditions. On our longitudinal chromatic aberration test, although the Samyang has the most vibrant fringing, it's not great results for the G Master either, with both displaying teal fringing at the top and amber fringing below the area of sharp focus. The good news, however, is that when it comes to taking real life images, both of these lenses are fantastic choices. Now, I will be totally honest and say that part of me was slightly skeptical when I first heard about Samyang developing this lens, as zoom lenses are a tough nut to crack for manufacturers, especially wide to mid-range zooms with a fast maximum aperture. However, I was pleasantly surprised, and I had to keep reminding myself that the Samyang is just half the price of the Sony, because they genuinely feel and operate like high quality and expensive lenses, and it really was hard to pick them apart. When shooting at the 24mm end of these zooms, there is a noticeable amount of barrel distortion. However, this is pretty easy to fix using the lens correction tools in Lightroom if this kind of thing really does bother you. In terms of sharpness, both of them are fully capable of taking beautiful looking images, though for the purpose of this test and finding a winner, we will need to look into this a little bit more. So, taking a quick look at the test charts, when shooting with these lenses wide open at f2.8 at the 24mm end of the zooms, the Samyang is actually the sharper of the two at the center of the frame. At the corners, although the Samyang is still marginally sharper than the Sony, it does suffer from some of the worst fringing I've ever seen on a lens, which really isn't ideal. At the 70mm end of the zoom, the results are pretty much on par, both at the center and at the corners. Both of these lenses have the added flexibility of being able to focus pretty close up to your subject too, both at the long end and the short ends of the zoom. In terms of image quality when shooting close up, at the 24mm end, both lenses produce nice sharp results even when shooting wide open at f2.8. At the 70mm end, it's more of the same, with both lenses resolving an equally sharp image. So it appears that the Samyang actually beats the Sony G Master when it comes to overall sharpness, though it does suffer from some very colourful fringing. Now, this does make things slightly difficult when it comes to scoring for points, but after thinking about it for a while, I'm just going to go ahead and give both of these lenses a point in this round, because really the results are just too close to pick an overall winner. But after tallying up all of the scores from our test, it appears that the Samyang is the winner of our head-to-head test, mainly due to the fact that it's significantly cheaper than the G Master, but still delivers results that are on par or better than the G Master. So if you can get over the additional weight and colour fringing issues, then this new Samyang lens is a total bargain in comparison to the Sony G Master, and I'm honestly really excited to see what other zooms Samyang will develop in the near future.